Michael Brune, Executive Director of the Sierra Club. Michael, welcome to the conversation.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on.
Glad to have you on, and for a pretty important topic too. So the Sierra Club and some of your allies are launching a lawsuit against Donald Trump's dirty power plan. Can you tell us about the origins of this lawsuit?
Sure, so a little background. So the power plan, Obama had a clean power plan that focused on getting not just carbon emissions, but air toxins, an immense amount of water pollution out of our power plants, meaning that in order to produce electricity, we had been emitting large amounts of all sorts of different kinds of pollution. And with Obama's EPA, we were able to make significant reductions in the amount of carbon pollution, mercury, other air toxics, soot, and smog coming from these power plants. And it was arguably the largest area of progress that we have made in the United States on climate change, by far more than anything else. And so, of course, when Trump took office, what happened, obviously, was that he took steps to try to reverse that progress. And so rather than replacing coal with solar power or wind power or battery storage or a whole suite of clean energy solutions, Trump wanted to keep the United States locked into coal as the dominant source of electricity for years and years and decades to come. We're working to stop that. We're working both in the courts and in the marketplace, and we're pretty confident that we're going to be successful.
So I know that, look, Trump campaigned on bringing back coal and all of that, which is, he certainly has some power to influence, subsidies and things like that. But I've also heard for years that the market is just moving away from coal as a competitive fuel anyway, and that theoretically things are moving towards clean energy regardless of what Donald Trump would like to do. So I'm curious, he certainly has this mission and he's had a couple of years now to achieve it. How much has he been able to hurt the effort to switch over to solar, wind, and things like that?
Not at all. No progress at all coming from Trump on that front. So let me tell you a little story about this. In 2010, which is around the time that I started at the Sierra Club, the United States used to get about 52% of its electricity coming from coal. There were 530 coal-fired power plants all across the country. And we set a goal in the Sierra Club to basically move beyond coal and to make sure that every coal plant was replaced by clean energy by 2030. We set an interim goal of wanting half of these power plants retired by 2020, by the end of the decade. And we've hit that goal. We have now retired more than 60% of the US fleet. It's being replaced by clean energy resources. Increasingly, it's being replaced by solar and wind and battery storage at a lower cost to consumers. And one final point, that under the Obama administration, we were retiring a coal plant, about one coal plant every 15 days. Wow. Since Trump has been elected, we have been retiring a coal plant about one in every 15 days. So this is happening regardless of what Trump is trying to do. It's happening in part because clean energy resources are cheaper, they're more affordable, and they're more accessible, but also because people have been organizing. They have been litigating. The Sierra Club, Earth Justice, dozens of organizations have been fighting this in the courts. And there have been tens of thousands of activists and organizers, scientists, teachers, people who live around these coal plants who don't want the asthma attacks. They don't want the hospital room visits. They don't want their air and water to be polluted because of a power source that is outdated and unnecessary. So it's a big success that we've had across the movement in organizing against these coal plants. And even though Trump is trying to undermine that, he won't be successful.
So I'm curious about some of the numbers here. So the EPA had put out a press release around the ACE plan, Donald Trump, one of his energy plans, and it talks about how much emissions reduction that we can expect from it. And if you just look at the raw numbers, it looks pretty good. But apparently they've been doing a little bit of tricky accounting with those numbers. So can you explain a little bit how they're sort of manipulating things to make Donald Trump's energy proposals seem better for the environment than they actually are?
Sure. Well, the short answer is that this came from the Trump administration. It was started by Scott Pruitt and has been continued by a corrupt administration and a corrupt EPA that doesn't really have the American Americans' public interest at heart. That is the most honest and most succinct explanation that I can give. A more detailed explanation is that what is happening is that they are inflating the costs of transitioning to clean energy, and they're also inflating the ability that coal has to meet the demands in the marketplace. In reality, we are already moving beyond coal. We're doing this in red states like Oklahoma, where coal plants have been retired, replaced by wind, and it's saved consumers in Oklahoma $400 million.
Wow.
It's happening in Iowa. Mid-American Energy in Iowa, which is owned by Warren Buffett, has made a commitment to move to 100% clean, renewable energy rather than relying on coal plants and nuclear power. It's happening in California. It's happening in the upper Midwest, even down in the South. We're seeing in almost every state across the country, we're beginning to replace coal, and increasingly we're replacing fracked gas with clean, renewable energy. We're putting more people to work, and we're saving money in the process. And anything that the Trump administration tries to do to reverse that won't be successful.
I'm curious about one thing though, and that is, when Trump got into office, relatively early on in his first term, they put fairly significant tariffs on solar panels. And I saw an updated report on the effects of that within the last month, saying that it had killed theoretically something like 60,000 jobs, $19 billion in private investment in solar. Do you think that has been a significant handicap to the development of solar? I mean, I know you're saying overall the rollout is going well, but those tariffs certainly can't be helping.
Yeah, the short answer I give to that is yes, sort of. So we are seeing tremendous growth both in the solar industry, in the wind industry, and then also for battery storage. Those three technologies combined is what's making it possible to replace coal and natural gas. So even though each of those industries are growing pretty significantly, they would have been growing even more. We would have seen more jobs, we would have seen more cost savings, and we would have seen a lot less pollution if we had a federal government that was actually acting on the side of the American public and not just the biggest polluters in the country. So I don't want to sugarcoat everything. A lot of the stuff that's happening from the Trump administration makes this work harder. It makes the progress we're able to achieve happen more slowly. It limits the amount of pollution that we're able to cut, but it's not stopping us. It's only serving to make this work more difficult and take longer than it should.
And so to return to the lawsuit, hypothetically, what is the end goal that you're aiming for with the lawsuit, and what sort of timeline can we expect it to proceed in?
So our plan is to make sure that the lawsuit doesn't proceed in court, and we expect to be successful, as we have been successful in almost every lawsuit that we've brought against this administration, whether it's working to protect our wetlands, our air, our water, our climate, our forests, our endangered species. Not just the Sierra Club, but many of our allies. We are winning in court almost all of the time. And our goal is to have this rule be vacated to make sure that the Clean Power Plan under the previous administration continues to be the law of the land. And in fact, when there's a new administration, that we dramatically accelerate the rate at which we're replacing all dirty fuels, coal and gas and nuclear power with clean, 100% clean renewable energy.
So at the same time that you're fighting back against some of the plans of the Trump administration, I know that you must be looking forward to the possibility that there could be a change in the presidency in 2020. Are there any environmental focused pieces of legislation, any proposals that the Sierra Club is in particular interested in seeing pursued or that you might be endorsing?
Certainly, Green New Deal. We think that that's one piece of legislation that I'll highlight, which offers an enormous opportunity, not just to cut air and water and climate pollution, but to put millions of people to work across the country and really revitalize American infrastructure. We're really excited about the opportunity to not just fight climate change, but to reduce economic inequality and begin to heal some of the divisions that exist in this country. So that's something that we're putting an enormous amount of resources into. And it's why we are going to be fighting as hard as we possibly can in this election to elect champions for reducing inequality and fighting climate change at all levels up and down the ticket. We need a new president. We need to have different leadership in the US Senate. We need to make sure that we have strong leadership in the House, but we also need governors and state legislators and mayors to advance Green New Deal policies at the local, state, and federal level.
I certainly agree. I'm curious. Like I would love for this election, the presidential election, to turn on the strength of someone's environmental policies. As you've been following this primary process, there have been some questions at the debates about climate, about the environment. There's been talk about doing more, focused events around that. How satisfied have you been, has the Sierra Club been, about the quantity and quality of questions and debate around environmental policy, climate change policy, things like that?
How satisfied am I? Not satisfied at all. I think that there have been a few questions about it in all of the debates that we've seen so far. And sadly, that's dramatically more than we've seen in the past couple cycles. So I guess you could say that that's progress, but it's really not that much of progress. And to be honest, what I would also say from the candidates, what we've seen from most of the Democratic candidates so far on paper and in speeches that they give that are devoted to climate change are pretty strong policies from most of the field that's out there. If you look at the policies that we're seeing, just about all of them are better than what we've seen from any presidential candidate yet. What we're not seeing yet is sufficient examples where you have presidential candidates who are linking their climate policies with their economic policies, with their policies to support a more vibrant and robust workforce. They're not looking, and we're not seeing the innovation yet, nor are we seeing candidates take the opportunity to show how all of these issues are at the crisis level and that they're all linked together. And so I don't want to just blame the networks and the moderators for not asking enough questions and not devoting enough climate change. I also want to issue a challenge to the Democratic presidential candidates to take the opportunity to more aggressively say fighting climate change won't just solve the problem of climate change, but it will solve some of the other biggest challenges that we have in this country.
Can we expect that at some point in the cycle, the Sierra Club will either grade the environmental policies of the different candidates or possibly issue an endorsement?
We will see how it's going. Right now, our main focus is simply to have a competition, both of ideas and to have candidates show how they'll execute their plans, either through Congress or through executive action. We're not quite in the position right now where evaluating one candidate against the other. We want to just stoke more and more of a competition. We've worked with a few other of our peer groups to help inform their grading of different candidates. But for us right now, we're mostly trying to push every candidate forward. We may make an endorsement in the primary process. We'll kind of work to see how that unfolds. It won't happen early in the primaries, though. Okay,
well, if you decide to, feel free to do it on the conversation. We would love that. But anyway, Michael Brune, Executive Director of Sierra Club, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.